Go for it. Yes.
All right. So welcome back. And also welcome to those of you who are joining for the first time. I thought before we got into the agenda that we would do a little bit of a check-in to help see where the mood of this group is today. It can be hard in these virtual rooms to like read the room. So, if you can pop in a quick word or two on how you're feeling today, that would be great. I'm going to put in long week. I'm trying to wrap up this week before I go on vacation, and there's definitely stress in the system. But I'm smiling. I've been looking forward to this conversation since our last one. A little tired. Yeah. Good. Yay.
Oh, yes, we have a long weekend here. I don't know if you have one in
Oh, yeah, no, I didn't. So you've had a shorter week this week.
no, on this coming Monday is going to be.
Okay. Yeah, I will be on a plane on Monday. So hence the last minute hustle to get things ready. Well, it's good to see everyone. All right. So today we are going to talk through a little bit about networking. It's going to be a good conversation. We're going to touch on 2 more steps on building your profile on LinkedIn. So last week we did 8. I've got 2 more for you. And then we're going to spend the rest of the time talking about beyond your profile and get into content creation. And then, of course, we'll have plenty of dialogue at the end for open Q&A. But before we get into the content, and if you were here last week, could you do me one more little favor? I want you to put a word or 2 into the chat about something you took away, because we have a few new folks joining and I would love to help them with a little bit of what they missed. So anything, if it's just a word or 2, something you remember from last week that you took away. Headshot matters. It does. Yes, others. Oh, we're going to talk about others today too. Yes, we are. First impression. It all yes. Oh, I love that. Yes, everything starts with trust. Yeah, thanks everyone for sharing. Now all the new folks are now up to speed on what we covered last week. And like last week, I encourage you to keep the questions coming throughout, in the chat or just directly. We can talk. I want to keep this as informal as possible. And let's get into it. So a little bit about networking. And I'm going to start with a question for the group, just like we did last week. How would you rate the confidence you have in your networking ability via LinkedIn? So do you feel A, confident in networking on LinkedIn and how to leverage it for opportunities? B, you're okay, but you need to up level networking for future opportunities. C, you're unsure of how to use LinkedIn for networking and you're seeking advice. Or D, you don't even know where to start. I see some C's, B's, C's, okay. C's, great. Okay, this is helpful, thank you. Good stuff. So, networking, it just gets this bad rap. I'm hoping to demystify a little bit for you because it's really one of the most crucial skills to building a successful career. And it's a muscle that constantly needs work. I mean, like networking has the word work in it, because it's work, and it takes work. It's true. And I think for anyone who kind of feels this ugh feeling when we talk about networking, it might help to have just a little bit of a mindset shift, to help you even get started with networking. So, if you think it's cringeworthy or scary, which I'm guessing is probably a lot of us on this call, it's probably because it feels like it's very transactional, right? Like, in other words, you go and ask for something from someone, or vice versa. Someone wants something from you, and that just doesn't feel great. So when you make this mindset shift, you could actually think about networking more like a relationship. And this kind of goes back to what someone just wrote in the chat window, and something that we talked a lot about last week, which is, yes, others. So in LinkedIn, for example, we talked about finding that balance between posting about yourself and then also posting about others and sharing others' content, engaging with others. This relationship minded shift is something we're going to talk a little bit about. And there's a few things on this. So first of all, number one is to start cultivating a relationship minding reputation. You want to be kind of the type of person who listens. So you want to find out, what are other people interested in? What are they working on? On LinkedIn, this could mean actually reading your feed, watching the videos, consuming the content, but not in that like quick scrolling kind of way, but actually stopping and really absorbing the content that's of interest to you. And I know that can be hard. It's just, you just have this kind of need to constantly scroll, and it can feel overwhelming. One way that I think about it is just taking, 5 pieces of content a day, for example, and committing to really, really absorbing those. And just think about it like you might get tested on it tomorrow, like really, really sit and absorb the content. So that's number one of starting to have a more relationship minded network for LinkedIn. Number 2 is to be a share bear. And I know this sounds a bit silly, and I giggled when I wrote it, but it sticks in my head, so I kept it there. But again, you want to provide critical information, expertise, or connections to get someone else closer to the critical information that they're seeking. And you can't really do number 2 without doing number 1, which is, again, going back to kind of listening and absorbing. But when you start to share resources, guess what? You become a source of information. And guess what happens? That's how you build influence. I'm going to say that again. Why it is important to be a share bear. When you start to share resources, you become a source of information for people. And that's how you start to build influence. And for those of you who say like, hey, I have no influence, I have no network, start sharing. Start sharing. Easy. All right, number 3, be consistent. Smart networkers, they know that consistently showing up, being helpful and reliable builds trust. Again, someone mentioned this earlier in the chat window, trust. And we're going to talk a little bit about posting frequency a little bit later. But I just wanted to get these 3 in front of you. Relationship minded, not transactional. Stop scrolling and listen, really absorb, be a share bear, and be consistent. All right. One more thing on networking, and feel free to, if you have any questions, I'm kind of flying through this a little bit fast here. So when it comes to networking, you really have two choices. You can be the proactive career person or the reactive career person. So personally, I would much rather be in charge of my career and work to drive any change versus waiting for people to reach out to me or waiting for the opportunity to come find me. Like, of course, you're probably thinking, duh, like, of course I want to be the proactive career person. But again, it takes work. Remember, networking takes work. It's not going to come just handed to you. And it sounds easier when you just say it, like you make it black and white. It just sounds, a little simple, but I do understand that we all have our own barriers to how to kind of start or how to continue networking. And I think it's really important to just sit for a second and acknowledge some of those. And I think some of you even mentioned some of these earlier last week. So, one big one that comes to mind is, you might have a fear of rejection or inconveniencing other people. Maybe you have this story in your head where you're saying like, I don't really know this person very well. I don't want to be annoying. I reached out to them and they totally ghosted me. Like, this fear of rejection is real. And I hope that you can let it diminish just a little bit. And don't let it deter you from following up or from reaching out to another connection or for asking someone to connect you to someone. Another barrier that I hear a lot is not really knowing what to say or even like how to reach out to someone on LinkedIn. And I'd love to hear if anyone has any good tips on this, because it can be difficult. One thing that I find helpful is asking for informational interviews. You can call them what other things like coffee chats or meet and greets. But for me, that really takes the pressure off because you're really just going to seek information about someone else's career path. There's no, asking for a job in the moment. So it kind of just eases it, makes it a little bit easier to reach out to someone. But I want to sit with that just for one more second because I want to remind us about the relationship minding piece. So, for me, and I'll give you kind of two examples of this. So why I like the idea of the informational interview, I said, it takes the pressure off, but it can also feel transactional. So how do you make that less transactional and feel more like a relationship? And this takes some thought and intentionality in getting this right. So, for example, when when people reach out to me on LinkedIn and it reads like a template, like something that they've maybe copy pasted and just sent out to various different people, that's an immediate red flag for me. And that's a no, thank you. Or if they come straight out and say, hey, Jenny, I see you work at Microsoft. I want to work at Microsoft. How can I get a job there? Again, like, appreciate that you reached out, but here's the link to our career site. Like, that's it. No thanks for setting up some extra time. But what does work is when someone took just a little bit of time, it doesn't have to be a lot, and they looked at my profile, or they looked up something that I was sharing on LinkedIn, anything. They just found something about me and they brought it back to me. And they did this in a few different ways. They liked and shared some of my content. They commented on a post or few. They sent me a direct message on LinkedIn saying that they enjoyed something I had written and that they wanted to dig in more on a specific piece of what I had written. Like those little things really, really stand out in the sea of all the spam that comes in. And so as you start to think about reaching out to people you may not know, or you may not have a connection who has a connection to you, so maybe you're like third removed from the person, just a little bit of homework to see what they've done is going to go a long way. I also have a rule where, and I take this in my work too, is where I give 2 or 3 times before I get. So I try to give, I call them gifts, but it could be like a like or a comment or a resource. I might, send them directly and say, hey, I saw you wrote about this. You might like to read this or listen to this podcast. So that's just my rule of thumb. But as you start to get through it, you'll kind of start to figure out what works for you. I'm going to pause there because I think networking is something that we should just kind of sit and see if there's any questions. Now's the time to ask. If you have any questions on what I just said or any other ideas or on how to kind of better get responses when you're trying to network on LinkedIn. No questions? How often do you network on LinkedIn? Do you set a habit of once a week? I do it daily. I've built into my daily rhythm where before I start my work, I check my LinkedIn and I go into my feed and I try to engage with 5 posts or so, but not in a forced way. Like if I just don't feel like, if I'm not feeling it, I don't engage. But I do go daily. I don't spend a ton of time, maybe 5 or 10 minutes. And then I would say reaching out to an individual, I do probably once a day. And a lot of people never respond, but most do respond. And even after this session, I'm going to be having a meet and greet with someone, with a peer who works in another company based on a connection that we made on LinkedIn. They actually reached out to me and said, they liked something that I said and wanted to meet me. And we're meeting. So with no intention, there's no agenda behind that. It's just a meet and greet. But I do get on there daily. I think if you're starting out, daily can feel like a lot, but try to get into a habit of it, whatever works for your schedule. Anything else? Okay. Let's see here. Do you have any stories of how networking has helped you in your career? Yeah. So the first comes to mind was how I got my first job out of university, so out of SFU. And it was through an informational interview. So this was before LinkedIn had launched, but that I learned about informational interviews through the co-op program at SFU and started to set some up. And that's how I ended up getting my first job, which then led me to my next job and my next to my next. So if there's real power in networking, I think also there's a lot of data behind this, but there's such a small percentage of jobs actually ever get posted. I don't know the number. It's probably like less than 30% that will ever get posted. Like, and if they do, it's probably on LinkedIn. So again, it goes back to that whole like proactive and reactive choice. Like if you just sit and scroll LinkedIn and you look for jobs, you're just getting like the minimum that is available, the opportunities that are available to you, and networking really helps amplify those. Other ways that I've known colleagues of mine, lots of colleagues get new jobs is through networking. And then oftentimes it's again that like giving a couple things before receiving. So you get to know someone, you're having coffee, you're not asking for anything, you're just kind of getting to know them, what makes them tick, sharing information with them that might help them. And then, one day they're like, hey, we're going through an organizational change, and I mentioned you to my manager, and they want to meet you. Like those are very normal, typical scenarios in the working world. Good question. Anything else? All right, let's get into LinkedIn. So I just mentioned earlier in there, but we're going to talk about 2 more steps in building your profile. They're really, really important. So I wanted to make sure we got those covered before we go beyond the profile and start talking about content creation a little bit. All right, so you want to be selective, as the quality of your feed will depend on your settings. And this is a little different than other social networks. So I just want you to kind of pay close attention here. So step 9A, so managing your settings. So this is, we all, we have our phones and we're probably on a variety of social networks and have all kind of gone into settings to some extent. And I really, really encourage you as you set up your LinkedIn profile is to just spend 10, 15 minutes just in settings. I'm calling out 2 here. One is it's managing your invitations, and you can find it through the data privacy tab there. Mine are all turned on, so I can get invites to all sorts of things, events, newsletters, page invitations. Mostly I ignore a lot of them, but I've kept it open, but you can decide how you want to get invitations to things. The second one I circled there is how people can actually contact you, whether it's directly and only through LinkedIn, or whether it's through a work email or a personal email or school email. So those are kind of 2 key ones, but they're all, I think, really important to kind of at least stare at a little bit and be like, does this kind of feel right? So I do recommend going there. And then step 9B is kind of around your profile and how you want to be visible. So how you show up. You could have it so anyone on LinkedIn can see all the details of your profile, and you can limit that. So for example, I have my headshot, my title, my about section, and maybe a few other things like the activity or my posts, but they can't see like the details of my work experience, for example. So go in your settings. I know it can be a little tedious to get in there, and it's an easy one to ignore, but I just highly recommend you spend a little bit of time. It'll really help your LinkedIn experience. The other one, step 10, is manage your connections. And this one's an interesting one and might surprise you that I'm bringing this up, but it's to be selective. So even if you're starting out, and I know there's this urge to like just want to grow your connections and your followers and like get as many people in there so you can start networking and build your network. I I would just like sit back a little bit, because you want to really make sure you're accepting the right connections, because the quality of your feed will depend on it. And that's like the quality of your feed is really, really important to your personal experience with LinkedIn. So think about who you're accepting. Do you know them? Is there any connection? Is there any interest? Look at their profile. There's a lot of fake profiles, a lot of disinformation on LinkedIn, just like there is on any social network. So it doesn't, just because it's a network for professionals doesn't mean that that doesn't exist. It's there and it's very rampant, and it's sometimes very hard to spot. So if you don't know someone who's reaching out and connect, just go ahead and look at their profile and you'll get a feel for if it's someone you're going to want to see, their content in your feed. And, also be selective in who you reach out to connect with. And that's the fun part when you get started on LinkedIn, is thinking about like, what are those areas that you're interested in? Like, are you really interested in tech? Are you interested in design and marketing? Whatever it is, like everyone's out there, and you can kind of go and start looking at who are the people who are doing these things that I'm really interested in, and start following them or connecting with them. Any questions on building your profile? Because otherwise we're done. So I'm going to leave it up to you to go and build your profile. There's lots of great tips, even on LinkedIn itself, on how to create an all-star profile. No question. All right. Let's get into beyond your profile and how we can leverage LinkedIn for impact. And we're going to talk a little bit about sharing updates versus publishing articles. And there's a key difference here. So for sharing updates, you can share whatever is top of mind for you. You can, you click there, you can link to different websites or any content you like. Let's say, for example, your workplace announced something, and you want to take that link and you want to share it. And, maybe you want to add your point of view, just basically anything. These are very kind of, sharing updates is kind of the quickest way to share content. But I do want to kind of take us back to something that we spent a lot of time talking about last week, which is tying everything you do on LinkedIn to your personal brand. So unlike, Twitter or other places, like you can just kind of, it's all about quantity, right? Like you just share stuff out. On LinkedIn, it's a little bit more intentional. So just remember, like, do spend that time on your personal brand. Use that as your North Star on the type of content that you post and that you share and that you engage with. And, I'll give you one example. So I work at Microsoft, and let's say Xbox, which is a brand of Microsoft, announces this really big new title, like highly anticipated title. I'm not a gamer, like zero. I'm not a gamer at all. But what I can do, and what I do, is I probably have a unique perspective on the way that announcement was crafted. Our team was responsible for the communications of that announcement, of that title. And so, and maybe, I thought that they did something really clever there. And so then I might forward, repost the announcement, and then I would add a little point of view about, hey, like, did you know we did this? And it really made it pop, or whatever. So that's a way to kind of take content that isn't specific to your particular personal brand or interests, but then kind of weave it into what you're interested in. And that's a good way to leverage LinkedIn versus just me having reposted that announcement, because why would I do that just because I work at the company? All right. I'm going to share a few best practices for sharing updates. Number one, share your authentic voice. Whatever you post, it should sound like you. So maybe you are, you could totally use ChatGPT or, other AI tools to create your content. A lot of people are playing around with those. I am. It's been really fun. But please edit them so they sound like you, like unique to you. Because again, like with all the information that all of us are absorbing, the attention deficit challenges that all of us have, like you're doing yourself a disservice if you're just copy pasting content or just reposting content. Like if you take anything away from posting, it's just to have some of you, authentically you, in that post. And feel free to jump in with questions. I'm just going to go through these. All right, I mentioned this earlier. Number 2, post frequently. And I italicized frequently because this is probably one of the questions that I get asked the most, is how often should I post? And the answer is there is no magic formula for this. And frequency means different things to different people. And at the end of the day, you really should just go back to yourself and how you're feeling about it. Like if you're starting to feel stressed out about posting on LinkedIn or gosh, any other social channel for that matter, like just take a break. It should not feel stressful. Like it shouldn't feel stressful. So just don't do it. And maybe one day you're really, 1 week you're energized and you're posting all the time and you're engaging, and that's great. And you're having fun and you're meeting people. And then another week or 2 or 3 and you haven't done anything. Like that is totally okay too. Like do not feel bad. Like post as frequently, as little, as much as you would like. There is no magic formula. Just as long as you're doing it, that's all I can say. I know I use like, does it bring me joy? Do I get a small, sense of accomplishment? If not, I just don't do it. And if you're having like real anxiety about sharing updates on LinkedIn, just know that that's totally normal, because I know that there's this feeling that you want to show up really well on this professional network and kind of buttoned up. My advice to you is not to stay back and do nothing, but actually just to start small. Start by creating your profile. Start by following people, start consuming content, listen, absorb content. Like those are steps you can take without actually putting yourself out there, but you're doing something. The key is to do something. And then when you're ready, maybe you'll start engaging on posts. You might even put a comment, a like, a repost with your own point of view. And then maybe you get to the point where you're ready to post your own content. So take your time, but just start. Don't stress about frequency. All right, number 3, share a point of view. I've mentioned this a few times. So remember, we talked about others and share bear. You can, reposting is an easy way to share content. But please just, add your point of view, add something. For example, let's say Jyoti wrote about 3 tips for hosts having an informational interview. And she wrote a short little LinkedIn post about 3 tips. And then I liked her post. I thought her 3 tips were interesting. And then I thought, okay, I'm going to repost this and I'm going to say, hey, check out these 3 tips about having a successful informational interview. And I would add a 4th tip, which is to send in that thank you note within 24 hours of your meeting. That's it. Simple as that. All right, number 4, start a conversation. Oh, yeah, this can feel hard. Let's say, okay, I have these days where I'm challenged with how to do something at work. Maybe it's never been done before, or I just don't feel like I have the experience or the expertise. And I'm just like sitting at home in front of my laptop, and I'm just like trying to figure out how to make this thing work. That's content potentially. Like if you sit with that and you reflect on what you're learning in the moment, like I have this hunch that you're not actually alone in that challenge, that there are people out there in the LinkedIn network of millions of people who could find that content and have it help them. So again, just like you can start conversations on the smallest things, like how you're doing that day, things you're working on, challenges you're facing, and share those out. And if you don't, I mean, gosh, sometimes like if you don't know, you could even go to LinkedIn and ask for advice. You would be surprised at how many people would be there willing to help you. So that's my point. Number 4, start a conversation. Number 5, include rich media to increase engagement. So the LinkedIn algorithm really prefers content like rich media. If there's links, pictures, photos, videos, especially native videos, like that is great. Like add the rich media. Canva is a really good tool to create really nice visuals in a really easy way. They have great LinkedIn templates. So if you want to start creating, nice visual content, Canva is a great place to get that. One thing about me, so I wrote in my about section that I'm a cold weather person. So I tend to take photos or quick videos when I'm outside walking. I walk outside every day, regardless of the weather. And I will take a quick photo or a quick video, and I will use that as my LinkedIn visual often. So you'll see my feed is just full of me in very cold weather. And it's part of my brand. And especially, when you're scrolling, you tend to kind of click on those visuals, and that's kind of hooks people in. Oh, and please do, when you do put visuals into your LinkedIn posts, check for accessibility. So they have really great accessibility features. So remember to use alt text to describe your visual. All right, last one. Number 6, create an opportunity for reciprocity. And again, I'm starting to sound like a broken record because I'm saying these same thing, but in different ways, like others, share bear, reciprocity, relationship minded, like it's all the same thing. So when you're trying to build your brand, when you are trying to create your network, you're not just talking about yourself, about others too. And I'll give you just one more example. So I follow this LinkedIn influencer named Lars Schmidt. He's a HR influencer. I'm really interested in human resources. And he also wrote a book that I'm reading called Redefining HR. And he writes about HR trends. So I don't know him. He's very well known. He probably has, I don't know how many thousands of followers on LinkedIn, and is well known in the industry. So he kind of feels like someone like very far away removed from me and my day-to-day work. But on LinkedIn, the beauty is you can connect with anyone. And, I can use an opportunity to reciprocate directly with Lars, who I don't know, because I can follow him, I can like his content, I can comment on his posts, I can take a picture of myself with a book. You see all those pictures of people reading books on LinkedIn, and I could write things that I'm learning about while I'm reading his book, and I could tag him. And all of this is reciprocity. Like all of a sudden his network is starting to see my stuff, and it's all like the back and forth that could potentially happen. So, it can feel intimidating to engage with people who have maybe big jobs or big followings or celebrity. But LinkedIn is a place where that's just totally okay and acceptable. And it's kind of fun when they start to respond and engage back with you. Any questions on posts before we get into articles? All right, I see a long chat there. What if I'm going to read a little bit here. What if your authentic voice is not upbeat and extremely positive? Yeah, I'm not planning to complain or nag, but my authentic voice is just a bit more grounded. Is it still worth to do an update? Or is it best not to share your grounded thoughts? It feels like being vulnerable and sharing your struggles or sharing your not extremely positive thoughts can be turned against you, that it would be perceived as flawed. Yes. Maybe it's a ground to not hire you. Yeah, I hear this a lot, and in fact, we talk a lot about this at work too, because we're kind of trying to create more of this culture where we share our failures, and it's been a struggle to embrace that across the organization, because people feel exactly here how Yulia is feeling, that it can come across as negative. All I can say is I'm be authentic to whomever you are, like however you feel that day or that moment, or just in general, like don't change who you are. We see a lot of people pretending to be other people on social media. And these days people see through it. Like, just do you, because that is how you're going to move forward in your career, is by being yourself. Faking it till you make it that is not a thing. Like, you can't get to where you want to go by being someone else. That's how I've been able to build my career. And I've had many moments where I thought, is this, like, if I show up as my true self, like, what are they going to think? But at the end of the day, I'm my own person. I have one life and I need to stay true to who I am. So when it comes to creating content, practice. Use people you trust, whether that's a peer or a friend, a family member. Before you click post, send it to them and say, hey, what do you think? How does this come across? Like, get feedback. Maybe use your network to ask them. But I don't want it to stop you from posting and engaging. But if you feel like you want to get a second pair of eyes, then by all means do that. But just, do keep going, keep engaging. Thoughts on using premium. Sorry, and I hope that helped. And I'm happy to chat offline too, if you want to dig in a little more. Thoughts on using premium. I love this question because I have thoughts on using premium. I'm not a premium user. I have considered it many times. I think it really depends on the goal you have for LinkedIn. And again, it kind of goes back to like the personal branding. Like, what is it? What is the outcome? Like, what is the thing? Like, why are you on LinkedIn? What do you want to get out of it? And does premium offer you a better opportunity to get to that outcome? For me, I'm not particularly on the hunt for a job. I'm sort of on it, honestly, to connect with people. I work remote. I'm alone most days here in my little office. So for me, connection is important. And I use LinkedIn to meet new people and to connect and get new perspectives. And so premium for me just doesn't make sense. I don't so much need to know who's viewing my content, or are recruiters getting, more access. Like, so I think my advice to you would just to get a little bit clearer on what your outcomes are, what you want out of LinkedIn. And then if premium has that offering, then go for it. Good questions. All right, so quickly on publishing articles on LinkedIn. So the biggest difference between posts and articles is character count. So the posts are limited, I think it's like 1,000 characters, and an article's a lot more, maybe like 100,000. So that's an opportunity to really showcase your knowledge. So if you're someone who loves to write long form, there's not a lot of us out there. But if you are one of the rare long form writers, this is a great platform for you, is to do LinkedIn articles. They're also more shareable. You can get, direct links, and they also sit nicely on your profile. They're easier to find. But I do think it's good to mix it up on LinkedIn as well, and not just stick with posts, but also mix between articles and also other types of media type of content. Videos. I'm thinking right now for my boss's account about how do we start using LinkedIn Live a little bit. So that could be a fun next thing to experiment with, but just kind of experiment and have fun with it. And if you're not having fun, again, it's okay. You don't have to do it. So just a couple best practices if you do want to start publishing articles. So first, create a headline that captures attention, have a hook, have people kind of stop and want to read it. Include an image, always visual. It helps. Be authentic. Again, I'm repeating myself here, but have your voice in it, have your point of view. And then think about your audience. All right, I'm going to stop on this one for a little bit. And think about like who your ideal audience is. And the word audience is so generic. Like we say, target the audience. Like, what does that really mean? And here's this trick that I use. I use this on LinkedIn and then just in work in general, is I actually create content for one person. That's it, like an actual human. And it's just one. So for example, if I'm looking for a new job and my dream company is Netflix, it's not, but let's say it was, and I wanted to work in their HR department, like dream, big dream, not like I'm going to work at the company down the street. Like if I could have anything I wanted, I'd want to work at Netflix. I'd want to work in their HR department. So what I would do is go on LinkedIn and find out who is their head of HR. They're on LinkedIn, I guarantee you. And I would follow them. And then I would start to learn about the type of content that they're creating, that they're sharing, that they're commenting on, that they're engaging with. And guess what? I just might create some content that might be of interest to them based on the little bit of homework that I've done. So it's just one little trick you can do to make it feel a little bit easier, is to kind of find that one person. And you can change them. I change them up depending on, what my goals are. But it helps me to really focus and create content for that one person and humanize it. Kind of puts that real human into the story. Okay, that was a lot. What time is it now? Okay, good, great timing. So we're kind of wrapping it up here. And I want to close with where we started last week, which was personal brand. And I wanted to share 4 final takeaways. So first takeaway is keep working on your personal brand. It is a forever thing. Just continue working away. Last week, I asked you how you would rate the confidence you had in your brand today. And most of you felt unsure about how to position yourself and were seeking advice. So spend some time, sit with it, get some clarity around what you want to do professionally, talk to your friends and family about, some of the things that they would say about you. Keep grounded in your values and what you care about. It's a journey, so just keep at it. Number 2 is commit to others. Commit to lifting others up, engaging with others, sharing their content, telling them why they're brilliant. Be a share bear. And number 3, show up. Look, you showed up today. Thanks for showing up. Keep showing up on LinkedIn, one step at a time. Just keep going. And the final takeaway is to reflect. And I mentioned this, you can actually start creating content without actually doing a lot of extra work. You could reflect on your day. You could reflect on a project, on something you read, something you watched. You could reflect on this conversation, whatever. But you'll probably surprise yourself that there is potential opportunity in that reflection by sharing it with others on LinkedIn. So we have a little bit of time left. I'll take some questions. I see one here. If you invite someone for an informational interview, is it best to offer to buy a coffee or to give a coffee? I would offer to buy them a coffee. Yeah, I would. Anything else? Mhm. Well, with that, I really appreciate you showed up and you got curious. You've taken steps to build your personal brand. I have 2 more things before we wrap. So first, some of us last week shared our LinkedIn URL in the chat window, and some of us weren't quite ready to do that. So I would like to offer this opportunity again. And let's give all of us who showed up here today a chance to connect with one another. So if you're so inclined, please pop your URL from LinkedIn into this chat window and let's connect with each other. And if Jyoti, if you can pop mine back in, that would be great. And if you already did it last week, please do it again. Let's bring everybody into the fold. We're all here to support one another on our LinkedIn journeys. Thanks for sharing those. Keep them coming. And the second thing is a question I'd like to leave you with. And again, using the chat, what's one thing that resonated with you the most from the session today? Just one thing, could be a word or 2. Just go ahead and type that into the chat window. I'm curious. Share bear. I know. I don't know if it was a real Care Bear or not, but I will figure that out. Yeah. Curating your message. Authenticity. And please don't be a stranger. Like, your career journey does not have to be a solo one. You know where to find me. You have all these new connections. And you also have SFU.
Great. Thank you for sharing that, Jenny.
Yeah.
So again, thank you from all of us at FCAT, alumni and current students, for hosting this workshop, these 2 workshops. They're very valuable. I know I'm taking away information that I'm going to apply to my personal LinkedIn as well. So thank you very much for your time and for your effort and for putting all this together and sharing your knowledge with us. We greatly appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And so I'm going to pass it over to Kim Hawkes. She's going to just talk a little bit as well.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you also, Jenny. That was super interesting. I'm not kidding. That that tip to focus your content on like what one person could receive, what a helpful tip, because LinkedIn is so huge. of course, and you have so many different connections, it can be difficult to kind of determine what is worthy of sharing. But just with that one tip, like what would you share with that one person? What are your goals with it? I think that would
Mhm.
be really helpful for me individually. So thank
Good.
you. Thank
You're
you for
welcome.
sharing your expertise and your wisdom with us. And thank you also to Jyoti for coordinating these two sessions. For those of you who I haven't met, my name is Kim Hockey and I'm with the Faculty of Communication, Art and Technology. And my role is alumni engagement. So you've got my LinkedIn. If you are alumni, if you're a future alumni, I don't mind that either. Please feel free to reach out to me if you want to talk some more about how FCAT can support you with steps after your degree at SFU. But thank you again to Jenny and Jyoti.
Thank you all. Have a good rest of your week.
Take care.
I'm going to go and connect with all these folks in the chat window before I lose access.